Centuries before the rise of Islam, back when powerful kingdoms ruled the world's richest trade routes, one king emerged whose legacy would completely bridge the gap between history and legend. We're diving right into this explainer to explore an era when the Middle East was an absolute powerhouse of empires. The sands of the Arabian Peninsula held some of the most lucrative commercial networks on the entire planet. And right at the center of it all was a towering figure who fundamentally shifted the religious and political landscape of his world.
So let's journey back to pre-Islamic Arabia. And look, you really have to forget that stereotypical image of a desolate, empty wasteland. This was a high-stakes arena. We're talking wealthy empires fiercely competing for dominance, wealth, and divine favor. From this intense crucible emerged a titan, Asad al-Kamil. His life is this fascinating puzzle where epic Arabian folklore meets hard, stone-carved archaeological evidence.
Section 1. Arabia before Islam, a hub of global trade.
To really understand As'ad al-Kamil, we first have to look at the thriving global trade hub of southern Arabia, which was entirely dominated by the Himyarite Kingdom. These guys literally built a superpower on aromatics. They completely monopolized the incense route, exporting massive amounts of frankincense and myrrh to Rome and India. But they weren't just wealthy traders, they were master engineers. They maintained incredibly sophisticated hydraulic systems, like the massive Merab Dam, to irrigate terraced fields that sustained a booming population. By the late 4th century, they had subjugated ancient rival kingdoms like Sheba and Hadramaut, becoming the undisputed superpower of the region.
Section 2. The Warrior King's Rise. Enter Asad al-Kamil.
Our focal point, also known as Abu Karib Asad, took that wealthy foundation and launched an unprecedented era of military expansion. The timeline here is actually super striking. Epigraphic records carved in stone show him starting as a co-regent alongside his father way back in 384 CE. By 390 CE, he ascends to the ultimate royal title. And around 400 CE, following the passing or retirement of his co-rulers, he becomes the sole monarch of a unified region. He pushed Himyarite power to its absolute zenith, over a reign that stretched until roughly 420 CE.
He held this incredible title, Tupaba. It basically means the supreme king, or the one who is followed. And he certainly wasn't content to just sit back in his capital. He led these aggressive, sweeping military campaigns deep into central and northern Arabia. Relying on pragmatic alliances and rapid cavalry strikes, he subdued nomadic tribes and totally secured those vital caravan routes that were feeding his empire's immense wealth.
Moving on to Section 3. The Legend of Yathrib. A Miraculous Siege.
Now, to understand why he is remembered as al-Kamil, which translates to the complete, we have to turn to the soaring epic traditions of his most famous campaign. Okay, so legend has it that during an expedition into the northern region, his forces laid siege to Yathrib, the city we know today as Medina. The traditional story says a severe drought completely decimated his army, leaving them dying of thirst. Just as all hope seemed lost, 2 local Jewish rabbis from the besieged city intervened. According to later Islamic historical literature, these 2 rabbis step right out onto the battlefield and pray for divine aid. Suddenly, this miraculous torrential rainstorm breaks the drought, completely saving the Himyarite troops. Struck by this profound display, Abu Karib Asad and his entire army instantly embraced Judaism right there on the battlefield. He lifts the siege, takes the rabbis back to Yemen, and sets about converting his entire kingdom.
Which brings us to Section 4, a discrete monotheistic conversion, the geopolitical shift. As captivating as that folklore is, we kind of have to put on our historian hats here and separate the later literary traditions from the physical archaeological evidence left in stone. The historical record points away from a sudden mass conversion on a battlefield, revealing instead a highly discrete, gradual, and elite-driven adoption of monotheism. And actually, it had begun before Asad was even the sole ruler.
Modern archaeological evidence tells us that this religious shift was actually a brilliant, calculated geopolitical strategy. By adopting a single, supreme deity, the Himyarite elite could unify all these diverse, fractured polytheistic tribes under one centralized administration. By embracing a form of Judaism, they essentially created a distinct ideological barrier against the aggressively expanding Christian empires of Aksum and Rome, both of whom were definitely coveting Himyar's extreme wealth.
Section 5. Decoding the historical evidence. Looking at the inscriptions.
To truly grasp this reality, we examine texts painstakingly carved into South Arabian monuments. In one specific inscription, dated January 384 CE, we see this sudden, radical break. For centuries, kings had invoked traditional pagan gods. But suddenly, royal inscriptions completely dropped the old deities. Instead, they simply read, "With the support of the Lord of the sky."
Rulers started invoking a deity they called Rahmanan, meaning the merciful or the Lord of heaven and earth, recognized by epigraphers as a title directly equated with the biblical Yahweh. This proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that a monumental, state-sponsored religious reform was securely underway. What these epigraphic texts reveal is a really fascinating syncretic form of Judaism that was adapted to fit Himyarite culture. It was embraced by indigenous elites through trade and diplomacy, unifying their power without the need for violent mass conversions. There were actually pre-existing Jewish merchant communities there already, and the Himyarite royalty absorbed these monotheistic concepts to strengthen their own political rule.
Finally, Section 6, Legacy of the Tuba, Bridging Fact and Myth.
Let's look at how these two distinct worlds merge to form his enduring legacy. Historically speaking, his campaigns absolutely pushed Himyarite territorial power to its absolute zenith. But in cultural memory, he became even larger than life. Later Islamic tradition credits him as being the very first to cover the Kaaba in Mecca with the ceremonial kishwa. While his actual conversion was a pragmatic, elite strategy, centuries of legends transformed him into a righteous, primordial monotheist, a Hanif, who paved the way for monotheism across Arabia.
And you know, the ripple effects of this were incredibly real. This ancient elite decision fostered a deep-rooted cultural and religious Jewish presence in Yemen that survived the rise and fall of empires, lasting right up into the modern era.
History ultimately remembers Asad al-Kamil as far more than just a king. Whether you view him through the lens of stone inscriptions or through centuries of rich tradition, his story reflects the incredible ambition, power, and cultural richness of Arabia before Islam. He truly remains al-Kamil, the complete ruler.
Which leaves us with a pretty fascinating thought to wrap up this explainer. If the magical rain-summoning legends of Yathrib were actually masking a highly sophisticated geopolitical chess match between ancient empires, how many other legendary mythical tales from lost civilizations are out there right now, just waiting for us to decipher the real historical truths hidden inside them?